Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have this conversation today. I have a very special guest on the show. This is introducing Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy is a world-renowned systematic work and constellations expert. She's a motivational speaker and author. And the book that just came out last June, I believe, is Decoding Your Emotional Blueprint, a powerful guide to transformation through disentangling multi-generational patterns. And there's so much to talk about here in this book, in this body of work. I really want to dive into constellations, that the work you do around constellations, and, all of this fascinating stuff like epigenetics and DNA and emotional blueprints. So let's have this amazing conversation. Judy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you.
Likewise. We were, before we started to record, just talking about how both of our kitties are ever present with us. And so you might see Judy's kitty, Sasha, or my kitty, Abeja, flicking their little tails around if you're watching online. Anyways, so where should we start, Judy? How about tell me how you got into this work? Tell me a little bit about your origin story.
Okay, so getting into this work was a very strange story. My father was killed here, and it was a case of write books or go crazy, and I figured that writing books was probably a better idea, and started writing fiction books, was looking for a piece of information, and found this person who taught the work that I do now. And started studying. He actually said to me, come study my work and I'll help you with a book. Went and studied the work and got zero help with the book. Then what started happening was, instead of just doing it with individuals, I had companies saying, well, can you coach our executives? So that led to a lot of executive coaching. And then they said, well, can you work with our teams? And can you problem solve in 3D using systemic work and constellations? And so I do a lot of that. Go in, have a look at what the problem is, and we set it out in 3D and then work it. But going back to the story, so I started doing this work, and then about 3 years or 4 years into it, somebody said to me, well, of course you can do this work. And I went, why? And they said, because it originated in South Africa, which I did not know at the time. It originated in South Africa with the Zulu tribe. So full circle moment for me was, when I left South Africa, I had worked in the healthcare arena. And when I left, the person who gave my farewell talk was a Zulu gentleman. And he said, you may be leaving us, but one day you'll find a way to represent us in the world. And I went, yeah. And now I do it every day.
He was able to see the future. That's so interesting. I love it. Well, so let's start off by defining some terms. Just in case anyone's not familiar with epigenetics, can you tell us what that is? I also want to define, when we're talking about systematic work in constellations, I want to define what we mean when we say that.
Okay, so let's have a look at epigenetics first. So epigenetics, first of all, you don't just inherit your physical DNA. You also inherit your emotional DNA. Your emotional DNA is your pattern of thoughts, feelings, actions, inactions, all the things that live in your system. And these come from events. So if an event is significant enough, and it's just significant enough for you or the person concerned, it creates an imprint on the system that becomes a blueprint for generations of behavior. So somebody says, I work, and then I lose all my money. Don't ever hold on to money. The don't hold on to money cycles down through the generations until it hits someone who goes, but I'm tired of this not holding on to money. I'd really quite like to have some. And they start to change the pattern. But that epigenetic imprint echoes through the system. So it creates that imprint on the system. Now, the important thing about that is it in turn affects your health, because you're either living by the emotions of stress or love. So if you're living by the emotions of stress, we know that breaks down the body. So once you start getting the epigenetic or the emotional DNA right, that allows you to then not live by the biology of stress, but to start reversing or perhaps undoing some of the damage that's been done, or at the very least mitigating the damage that's been done. So that's your epigenetic piece. Now, there are great studies for that. One of the latest ones is the 9/11 study, where they studied mothers who carried babies at the time of 9/11, and they discovered that their markers for PTSD were elevated. But they also then discovered that the children's markers were elevated. And there are studies called the Great Dutch Hunger Winter, in which they've studied 4 generations where a significant event happened and it's impacted 4 generations and counting. And that happens when we don't know to stop and look at what's happened, debrief it, take what we need and leave what we don't. And so instead we sit with the whole thing. It's as though the event is over, but something hasn't told our nervous system the event is over.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I definitely identify with that. I'm curious if you know, in your work and your research or experience, I always wonder if that, for lack of a better word, trickle-down effect of the trauma being inherited over generations becomes less, what is the word? Less, like, for example, if my mother experienced something very traumatic and that PTSD is lodged deeply within her, then it's passed on to me. Is it like one layer removed?
No, it's actually the opposite. What happens is, because it's not spoken about, we don't talk about that. So we internalize it. Over time, details of the event fade, but the symptoms get louder and louder, because systems don't like to have things not included. So if that's not included and given a place, it keeps hitting louder and louder until somebody sees it and gives it a place. Now, it may be an unconscious thing of, I don't want to work like my grandparents and my mother did, I'm changing it. Or it might be, I see what happened in the family, I very consciously go, there is its place, I don't need to repeat it. But what we're looking at is, you are the change agent. You're the one who can do something with what's happened that hasn't been given a place. And that's the beauty of systemic work. So systemic work is the science of you within a system. You didn't just happen on your own. You happened as a part of an entire system. And all of their thoughts, feelings, actions echo down. So you think that you've got free will, right? No, you don't. You're at the mercy of all of that. And in fact, a very high percentage of the time, you're simply reliving ancient history. You're not fully present, and you're not creating a different future. You're following what's going to be an inevitable future. So it really takes awareness of who you are in the system, where your thoughts, feelings, and actions come from, and how you want that to be for it to change. So go ahead.
Oh, I'm curious. Maybe you were going to go into this, but I feel like you're starting to explain systematic work. How does that relate to constellations?
Okay, so the systemic work is the first part of it, and the constellation is what we call the 3D version of that. So we do a lot of the systemic work. People come in, we can see where these things fit into their system, but very often we're working it out here. 90% of the time we're working it out here. We're making deductions and having insights. What a constellation does is, you come in and you say to me, you know what, I really struggle with relationships. And we have a history of that. And I say, when did it begin? What was happening in your life at the moment? Is there anyone else in your family who's similar? And so you may say, well, Mom also struggled with relationships. So what we'll do is I'll say, okay, I want you to pick a representative, because it's usually a live event. I want you to pick a representative for your mom, for yourself, maybe for your grandmother, and maybe even the grandfather and father and great-grandfather. Let's have a look. And so what we do is I then say to you, give me a spatial picture of what that looks like. Are you close to mom, further away from mom? Set yourselves up in relationship to each other and in relationship to men or to a partner, whichever it is. And suddenly you'll begin to see that mom struggled with a partner, grandmother struggled with a partner. Oh, I do too. It's an unconscious loyalty. But because you can see it, hear it, talk about it, walk in it, Now you're having an embodied experience of the whole system. And so this systemic embodied experience begins to rewire your brain very, very fast and your body. And those lead to what you would experience as an aha moment. So in the moment, you'll actually see people jolt and they'll go, oh my goodness, so it wasn't about me. No, it's not about you, but it's all about you because you're the one who can do something different. So the fuller version is, it's all about you who came to see me. It's not about you because if you look at the system, it's showing you where it came from. And it's all about you because you're the change agent.
I want to use a real life example because I understand what you're saying, but I feel like there probably nuances, I'm sure, for each person.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I think, at least for me and my family trauma, it's always been very out there. We've always talked about it since I was a young kid. I was very aware of what happened. This is on my dad's side of the family with his trauma, which was very intense. And to make a long story short, his mother was institutionalized and diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic when he was 2. So he was separated from her and placed in foster care from the ages of, he was in and out of foster care for about 10 years. And then he was reunited with his father and his 2 other brothers. And so he was always very vocal with my sister and I about his trauma. And I still feel, I've always felt that it's a close relationship with my father, but it's very emotional. And I feel like I take on a lot of his trauma. So I guess my question is, because what I hear you saying is the way to change the cycle, to free yourself from it, is to bring it up to consciousness, to be able to talk about it, to look about it, to have an embodied experience about it. I feel like I've done those things, but I don't feel free of the trauma.
Right. So part of the other part of that is, if I had you standing with dad and his mom. So if I had a representative for dad and a representative for his mom, I would be inclined to maybe say to you something like, can you look at your grandmother and can you tell her you weren't free? What happened to you locked you up and you weren't free. And dad, you took on some of that trauma for you because you were without a mother and you weren't free. And now I'm not free either. I carry your pain and I carry her pain. Grandma, Dad, I'm too small for all of this. I see it and I can give it its place, but I can't carry it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have to leave that with you. What I can do is, Grandma, I can give you a place in my heart. Dad, I can give the experience a place in my heart. And I'm the one who needs to bring joy back. I'm the one who needs to bring freedom back. I can see you and respect what you went through, but if I carry it too, we never get to bring the flow and the love back. So for me, it's time that I change that.
Mm-hmm.
How's that feel?
It feels scary.
Of course, because you're part of that system.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I guess my question is, when you say representative, this is a physical person standing in a space?
Quite often, well, it depends. Quite often it is a physical person, and they're very accurate because we're actually super able to sense into each other's systems. Mm-hmm. We've always been able to. People just didn't tell us that's what we were doing. And so people are really accurate when they sense in. So that's the first piece for you. The second piece, when you say it's scary, is absolutely right, because you are part of what we would call a systemic trance. You know how to belong in that system. It feels familiar. The pain feels familiar. It feels almost sacred in a sense, but it's not when you keep repeating it. Mm. If you look at it and you know, and you say, I see that and I see what happened to you, and my heart aches and I can't carry it. I have to do this differently. It begins to unbond you. And by the way, if your grandmother was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, you might want to go further back in the system, because sometimes we see that in people who have had a victim and a perpetrator situation in the system, and it wasn't dealt with and it wasn't resolved. And so then along comes somebody who holds both the victim and the perpetrator in one body. So just be aware.
And so in this case, the person who's holding the victim and the perpetrator in one body is who?
Your grandmother.
Okay.
Both are in one body at the same time. It's why you can see that.
That's why the split. Okay, exactly. That makes sense. Thank you. This is selfishly very therapeutic for me. So thank you for walking me through this. It's a family pattern. I mean, it's so true. We are, as a people, I think it's fascinating, ancestry.com and people giving that as gifts and then finding, long lost siblings, or like that their dad is not really their dad, and all of these things I think is so interesting. As it relates
to thing. You just touched on ancestry.com. Genealogy 1.0, aka ancestry.com, tells you where you belong. Genealogy 2.0, which is what I do, is your interactive piece that shows you why that matters, what the effects are, what the origins are, and what your purpose is. So people have got the first part of the puzzle, but they haven't tapped into the fact that all of the events and all of those ancestors have information that they can use to actually better their lives and the lives of those who come after them.
Can you tell me more about when you're using that ancestry or genealogy 2.0, and you said this tells, you get to the point where it tells us what our purpose is? Yeah. Will you tell me more about that?
Absolutely, because yours is joy and yours is flow. In your family and freedom, joy, flow, and freedom stopped with your grandmother. And then your dad didn't have it either. He was all over the place and wasn't really that free either as a young kid. And now it comes to you. And so the system asks you, will you also not be free? Or will you turn around, be free, be happy, and flow? That's a life purpose right there. You're going to change the emotional DNA of your system. And if you have kids, you're going to change theirs. Or if you have community, you're going to change theirs, because now it's going to ripple down in a very, very different way.
I love that. That really resonates. Oftentimes the word that comes up for me when I think about what makes me happy, what makes me feel like I have purpose, the word freedom comes to mind. But when I hear these things, right? Yes. When I hear these things, they sound very abstract, right? Joy, freedom. What do we mean when we say that? What does that look like on a daily basis?
For you, and it'll cycle down in different ways. So just the word freedom, because your grandmother didn't have, it was gone. Your dad didn't have the freedom to be himself within that family. It was gone for a number of years. So it doesn't matter which way it presents. Freedom is going to be a very important word for you. So you're going to look at, do podcasts give me the freedom to do what I want to do? Am I at home and now I have the freedom to have my kitties around me? Freedom is very important in your life. So that becomes purpose. And it's often single words or feelings. Now, abstract it might sound, but you know for yourself, when you're doing what you want to and you're enjoying the freedom that affords you, there is a very specific that happens inside you. And it's actually tied back to dad and back to your grandmother. For those who couldn't have freedom, I will. Thank you for everything you did to get me here. I'll take that gift and now I will make freedom a part of this family. That's a pretty good purpose.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. So what are meta patterns?
Oh, meta patterns are our big guns. War, pandemic. These, and actually, no, those are the meta events. A meta pattern is what cycles down from those. So with war, people in a lot of fear. With a depression, a lot of people, so meta patterns, a lot of people affected. So lots of people in scarcity. In a pandemic, lots of people ill, and so lots of people in fear and scarcity. So your meta patterns roll down from those. And of course, it depends on the way you approach it. I heard so many people during the pandemic say, this has killed me, or this has buckled me, or this has broken me, or it's really set me back. I also heard people who said, you know what? When the pandemic hit and I couldn't do what I was used to doing, I figured out I better get up and figure it out very fast or we were going to be in trouble. And I now have a different career. So it's also all about in your family, when a crisis hits, what is the typical reaction? Do we fold or do we fly? Which one are we going to choose?
Yeah. I often think about, I'm fascinated with World War II, how we as people watched, participated in, fought against, or kind of allowed something like the extermination of so many Jewish people to happen.
And we're doing it again, right?
Yes. And so many.
We didn't learn.
Yeah.
And nobody stops it. We all just go, oh, that's sad. And it's happening again.
Yeah.
Because we didn't deal with it. And
so what do we do with that as a meta body of people? I mean, the cycle, the cliche saying is the cycle repeats until the lesson is learned.
It's exactly right. It's more than that, though. The cycle repeats until eyes open and we're willing to look. And so right now, if it's not on my doorstep, well, I don't need to look. Okay, wait till it comes to your doorstep next, coming to a place near you. Because if we don't learn, what we also do is we then enable bad behavior, which is what we saw, and it's what we're seeing. We see things devolve. We see uncivil situations. We see in countries a lack of civility where we yell at each other, scream at each other, enable bad behavior. It's okay until it isn't okay. What do? We stop and say, and we don't let it go all of that length of time and hope it doesn't hit us.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you feel like, okay, I'm relatively privileged, which I feel like I am, I'm relatively safe, which again, I feel like I am. And also I'm sitting here watching this all unfold around me and it's scary and I want to affect some sort of change. Do you believe, and I've heard different theories on this, that change happens with the individual and you can really only start from where you are with what you can control, which is your reaction to certain situations. But that feels a little bit like, I don't know, there's a couple of different, I think, issues I have with that idea or solution. One is that place a lot of onus on the individual to basically change the world. And two, it feels like, now I'm getting into the realm of politics, but it feels like at a larger level, the politicians, people that have the ability to affect change on a big scale policy, could have more responsibility to make something in a better way happen.
Yes, they should and could and must, but look at what we've said yes to. And what we've said yes to, if it wins, well, people go, oh, so that's the way we play the game. So we all scream at each other now and we're all ugly to each other now. Okay, because that's how you get your seat. When the seat becomes more important than the people you serve, we have a problem. And yes, they should be more accountable, should be kinder. I look at this country has so much going for it, and we don't even realize it. I would love to take you to some of the other countries, but we need to be responsible for it. And with it, we do have rights. We also have responsibilities, and we've got to address both. Does it start with the individual? Yes, it does. Because for as long as you are reactive, everybody else around you has permission to be reactive too. When you're not, and you listen and you invite, you never know who you're affecting next. You never know. And if we all keep doing that and people around you know, look, when I'm with Tessa, don't go there because she's not going to get into that kind of boxing match. But there are other people who are going to go, I can be me around Tessa. Doesn't matter if I sit to this side of her or this side of her. I can say what I feel. She will listen. She will offer hers, and we'll walk away with a little bit more of each other and ourselves. And I think we've forgotten that.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. I want to change gears a little bit and go back to the conversation we started to have around, okay, so I'm aware of my family trauma and the PTSD that I've inherited. What about for the person who feels like, gosh, there's just something not right? Maybe it's not talked about. I feel like there is something under the surface here that I can't quite articulate. And so how would somebody begin to even identify those family patterns that they have no words for?
So what you want to do is look at the places. The best way to begin untangling it is look at the places that you find yourself irritated, annoyed, sad, uptight, resistant, definitely dogmatic. Dogmatic's one of the best places to look at it. Start looking at that and then write down, what do I feel about whatever that is? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? And what are my actions? And then ask yourself, where did those come from? Where did I first have those? What was happening at the time in my life? And then ask yourself, who else in the family may have a similar pattern? Or is it just mine? That begins to give you the flavor of what's sitting underneath the issue that you may have. And once you've got that, the next step is to then say, okay, so this is asking to stop. What's asking to start? What would I really love to have in that place? What would make my heart sing? How would I like my world to be? And write down again, what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What are my actions? And now you're going to sit with the pattern trying to stop and the pattern trying to start. The pattern trying to stop is often tied to prior generations or prior events. The pattern trying to start is the change agent through you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What are systematic sentences?
So systemic sentences are...
Systemic, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Everybody starts with systematic and then they get down to... Systemic sentences are things like, money doesn't grow on trees. Only rich people are greedy people. Only cheats get rich. What else? Tell me some of the things you say about relationships.
I am a serial monogamist.
There you go. So that is a systemic sentence. Who else was a serial monogamist? When did that happen for you? What did it look like? What was the event that started that? Are there those patterns in your family system? Yeah. And they also are the things that run your life. Systemic sentences are exactly what runs your life in every single aspect of your life. Money, relationships, team building, doing a podcast, any of those. You have thoughts about those. Those thoughts, and they run you, are the systemic sentences. Things like, well, in our family, it's education instead of money. Oh, good. That's great. You're going to be a great college professor with not much in your pocket because you set up the spell. It's almost like a spell.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a systemic sentence for us to workshop, if that's okay.
Sure. Go for it.
I want to be a writer, always have since I was a little kid. And I have this thought pattern that authors won't make any money. That not just that, but that authors are, they're artists. Like it's somebody that will lead a tortured life, and you can fill in the blank with any variety of torture you want.
Okay, so that is also a meta sentence, by the way, because you hear that everywhere. Starving artists, tortured lives. It's the only way. No. If you look at some of the greatest stories, some of those guys are really not particularly tortured and very, very wealthy people. And so we've taught ourselves, though, because somewhere along the line, there were many artists who didn't do well financially. So in order to belong to the club and not feel like we didn't get it right, we have, well, it's starving artists. You won't make any money doing that. Thank goodness someone like Walt Disney didn't buy into that idea, or we'd have had no Walt Disney or Disney World, because it's all about the art. Yeah, that's a mindset that came from many people not making it, but also from many people who didn't fully commit to it, who didn't fully run the process, and then said, "You see, you can't make money."
Yeah. I guess my follow-up question to that is, okay, let's suppose that we could be the next Walt Disney. There's all of these follow-up questions about the what ifs, right? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm not a good enough writer? What if this isn't my path? What if blah, 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 blah? We can go down the what if path. What is my question around that? I think it's like that if we were going to unpack that meta sentence or the systemic sentence, underneath it, there are layers of fears of what ifs.
There are layers of other systemic sentences.
Yes.
All the little what ifs are there too. So you've got to unpack all of those and go, is that true? Is that true? Really? Is that me? I'll tell you my one that'll help a little bit perhaps. So when I started out with the work, I taught people, and then they said, but where are the manuals? And I was like, I'm not doing manuals. What do I know about writing a manual? And eventually I realized, okay, for this to really kind of find its legitimate weight, it had to have a body of work. And this fool was the one who did not sign up for it, but now I was signed up for it. And my whole thought was, I can't do this. I hate this. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I know that guy, when I was in 10th grade or 11th grade, said, don't ever write a book, because if you do, it's just going to be a flop. You're useless. So I know this. Now I'm writing manuals, and I mean, it was so bad. The cats would go out one window and everybody else would go out the other, and I'd sort of grit my teeth doing these manuals. So I get to about the 9th manual, and I go through this whole process again of, I hate manuals. I can't write manuals. And by this time, I'd had a lot of people say to me, your manuals are incredibly good. When we come to an event and we go away with this, we've got a guide. We've got a workbook that we can use. They're fabulous. And I went, okay, so either everybody's lying and they're really, really nice people and they're just being sweet, or I'm telling myself a lie here and I actually can do manuals. You should see how much easier they are now. I sit down, put a manual together, because I don't have the systemic sentence that says, I hate manuals because I'm too stupid to do them. So I'm the one who put it in, and I'm the one who got to take it out. But there are many, many of those, many. I mean, and then, of course, you get the imposter syndrome, which is under all of that, until you realize it's not imposter syndrome, it's pioneer syndrome. You may not have all the answers, but you're willing to go in search of them. You're just a step ahead. So imposter syndrome doesn't really exist.
So what are your thoughts on this idea of, are you familiar with Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours?
Yes, and I am. And yes, I think there is absolutely something to that. There comes a point at which the information is there. You don't need to just always be relitigating or going in search of it. It begins to be in your bones. So there absolutely is something to the 10,000 hours. You start, I think what he's alluding to is that by that point, you start to speak it as a second language. So it doesn't matter who puts you into what room and says, speak about a topic. You can, because it's now in your bones. It's like becoming bilingual.
Yeah. I think where I was going with that, bringing that up, is this idea of being innately good at something, following or finding your purpose, and kind of feeling like I am someone who often says, I don't know a lot, which feels like a whole different conversation about how that's a cop-out. But then feeling like, okay, well, if I wanted to pursue something, I could just roll up my sleeves, spend the time doing the work, and then it would eventually be that thing that I am good at.
It would be, but here's where it's not just what you're good at. It's what changed for me was I started doing this work just to get food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
The change came for me when I looked at that and went, I wonder what this work could become. Oh, there's a bit of an adventure in there. I could do these live events. I could do the book. I could make a difference. I like this. Your purpose doesn't find you. You choose it. And it's when you go on the adventure and you completely commit to it, and then you start asking yourself, how could this be fun? How could this be an adventure? What could I do with it? That's when everything changes. That's when you have chosen your purpose, and it'll take you all the way to where you want to go to. And it may take you to places you never envisaged. I never meant to write a book. I told people for a long time I was not writing this book. And they kept on and on and on. So I said, we'll do a little ebook. And then the little ebook, somebody said, you need a literary agent. And I said, no, and then got one, or actually had one come to me. And then they said, oh, no, we need this to be a book with a publishing company. And I went, yeah, no, really? Okay, fine. If you think you can do that, yeah. And they came back and said, oh, they want your book. I never started out that way, but what I did do was I'd committed to taking this work bigger, and I'd committed to doing what I could to make that a good body of work. And then it found its own steps.
And the book you're referring to is this book we're talking about, Decoding
the
Your
one that was
Emotional
just
Book.
released in June. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So having gone through this process of writing the book, giving birth to it, now it's out there in the world, and you're looking back on it several months later.
Right.
What did you learn from that process?
Oh my goodness, a lot. A lot. At the day that they came back and said, we want you to write the book, I was really happy. The day after my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And so it was, now we had a dual thing to do. They said to me, you probably need to take 6 months off and just dedicate it to writing the book. Now, bear in mind, I'm an executive coach with a very full load. And then I had all of these other pieces that had to happen with Mom. And it was in Dallas, 2 hours away. So I had to suddenly live 3 lives in one life. Mm. And my first thought was, I won't be able to stay in business. I don't know how this is going to happen. And then my second thought was, if you think I can take 6 months off, I've got to put food on the table. That can't happen. What I learned was I could do the appointments, I could see clients, and I could drop into a space and learn to focus really well and create the chapters for the book. I also had a fabulous editor who kept me on track all the time. She would say to me, you can fall apart later. Right now we have a book to complete. And so I learned that life happens. There isn't a perfect moment to do anything. Life happens. And you're going to either write the book or say, well, no, I have somebody who's sick, I can't. No, I have a full workload, I can't. Or you're going to say, you know what, if I want this and I want the dream, life happens and I'm going to have to just work within life. Mm. So I learned that. I learned that people were really interested in finding out who they were and in finding out that they're never a train wreck. They're just a possibility in motion. So they like that. And I love being able to share that. I learned that it gave me a little bit more weight as in this arena. I learned that people wanted to come and find out more about life in general and definitely about ancestors. I learned a ton about tech that I never thought I'd have to. I learned to go on podcasts, and I learned that I really like that. I like having conversations. I like being on the TV for 5 minutes on Good Morning Jacksonville at 10 o'clock in the morning. I really enjoy that. And I learned to be really smart about managing my time. So I gained a tremendous amount. Mm-hmm. Loved it.
On the topic of time management, any tips, tricks, hacks that you could share?
Yeah. number one, be really clear about setting some time for yourself. I've not been great about that in the last while because there's been so much, but it's helpful because if you do, you think clearer. So budget out an hour a day if you possibly can. Number two thing, don't say yes to things that are not going to serve what you're doing. Just don't. It sounds nice to be the yes man to everything. Don't do that. What would be number three? Yeah, don't get lazy, and I say that gently and with a lot of love. I learned that I would rather sit in front of the TV and just stare at nothing aimlessly. But I also learned that there's a lot I can do if I really work with my time. And by the way, I can still watch some TV. But there's so much. I realized how much time I wasted. And I've learned to become time efficient because I know here's the hour, this is what I have to do. I've learned that instead of saying, no, I'm creative, I need 10 hours. No, I have an hour. Switch on for the hour, focus for the hour, and get it done. And when you teach yourself to do that, you're going to be amazed at how much you can do in how little time. We think we have to, as either creative people or as workers, I have to have my space. No, get disciplined, drop into your space and make it happen. Forget the excuses.
Yeah, great tips. I love those. Thank you, Judy. That was kind of an off-the-cuff question, but relevant. I'm curious, now that this book is out and it's been some months, are you looking forward to writing a second one? Are you feeling no pressure?
Yeah, I said I needed a little bit of time, and then people started to say, so which one is it going to be? And I'm aware that it's starting to simmer. So I think the lovely thing is I've got a really, really good, as I said, a great editor, and she's a super companion guide along the way. And there are two kind of pieces that have been floated. One is people want to know a lot more about your money DNA, which, by the way, I'm going to be teaching at Disney World this year in November. And the other one is, and I keep going, when they ask me to do that, is writing a book about victims and how to not be a victim, because that's the great sleep in the world at the moment. There's too much victim mindset, and not only is it detrimental to us, but we've monetized it, we've glamorized it, we've sanitized it, and it's keeping us very badly stuck.
Yeah, interesting topic. So would you mind just when you say victim, it sounds like you're speaking more to the mindset of victimhood and not necessarily being a victim.
Keeping yourself trapped.
Yeah.
So I got into trouble for this, by the way, because somebody said to me, suffering is sacred. And I said, suffering is going to hit all of us at some point. But if you keep suffering, it's not sacred, it's stupid. Being a victim keeps us trapped. Being a victim within a culture or an ethnicity keeps us trapped. I have a Jewish friend who said to me the other day, you don't understand. Jewish people know how to suffer. We are born to suffer. And I said, great. And how many more generations before one of you stops? We only do that for as long as we choose. Now, yes, there are big demographics of people who've been marginalized and they've been victimized. Okay, do you want another generation of that? Or do you want to do something different? And we cannot, when we're victimized, and I've been there, we cannot expect somebody else to do it for us. I cannot say to you, you know what, 3 generations or 5 generations ago, your grandparents sabotaged mine, and as a result, you're very wealthy, I struggle. You need to pay me. You know, because all I'm doing is monetizing and glamorizing instead of growing. If I look at that and go, well, they got something right, and yeah, what they did there wasn't really kind, but what can I learn from that? And how do I make sure that I'm responsible for my cultural group by growing something remarkable and being that model or role model. How do I do that? Because that's infinitely wiser and better for the planet than pay me back for what was done to my ancestors. Because, by the way, you're going to learn nothing when we do. What? I've been there. I was the English-speaking South African in a predominantly Afrikaans-speaking world, and was told, we'll get on with it. Guess what happened? They said to me, we do not speak English in this where I was working. We don't speak English here. You will have to learn to speak Afrikaans. So I did. Who was richer?
You.
Of course. But I didn't demonize what they had either. Okay, you have a language, that's great. Don't need to demonize you. Don't need to demonize your language or your culture. I'll just learn both because I'm richer. I have two now. You still only have one.
Interesting. Ah, what a fascinating conversation. I could go on and on about this. And I really appreciate this body of work. I think it's so important and so many of us benefit from it. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for sharing it with us, our listeners. I'm curious if there's anything else that you wish I would have asked you or that you would like to speak to, or any final thoughts you'd like to leave.
A couple, maybe one is this all I do? If they go to my website, they will also find 2 meditations there. They're constellations meditations. They're a world first. It takes you through the process of a constellation. Those are helpful. So that would be the one. But I think the most important thing for people to realize is it doesn't matter where you are in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. It's never too early or too late to start recognizing you're the potential change agent. It starts with you. And also, more than anything, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life at the moment. You're not a train smash. You never were. The universe is always in service of you. It always has been, and it always will be. You just have to be willing to look.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Judy. I'll put this in the show notes too, but just for the sake of saying it, what is your website?
It's Judy Wilkins-Smith.com.
Okay, great. Thank you. And is that the best place for people to connect with you?
They can connect with me there. They can connect via Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm all of those. And I'm also on Spotify. I have a number of podcasts on Spotify, so they can have a look there, and YouTube.
Great. Thank you so much, Judy. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. I so appreciate your time.
Likewise, I have loved having a conversation with you. It was great, and I hope you have great holidays.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information, and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.